for our minds to think about that which we're about to do. And one of those songs that we sometimes sing, not very often, but occasionally, number 162 in our hymnal book, Night with Ebon Pinion. The first actual sentence of that song is somewhat difficult to get our minds around, I believe. It says, night with ebon pinion brooded over the veil. One of the reasons I think that we have problems with this is the time in which this was written. It was written in 1871, and that was a different world from which we live in. Their language was even, in many cases, quite different. There are things in this particular verse or particular sentence that we don't often think about, and we really don't use them in our everyday life. Night with ebon pinion. The word ebon comes from the word ebony, I believe, and it means dark or black. And the word pinion, depending on what your background might be, in my case, being from an engineering background, I always thought about it as being a gear, that which rotates about a center and transfers power to the wheels of an automobile, for instance. I read just this past week another thought in regard to that, and this person said that he thought that it had to do with a bird's wing, and it was that portion of a bird's wing that would be equivalent to our wrist. And if you did something to that, like a ligament, or even if you cut the feathers, the very feathers on the end of the wing, the bird could not fly. They're called pinion feathers, as I understand it. And so depending on, I guess, which definition you might refer to of pinion would be how you would feel about what this is saying. The thought, and that one that I just mentioned last about being a bird's wing, perhaps goes along with the next phrase, brooded over the veil. We think about a chicken brooding over its little chicks, keeping it out of the weather and that type of thing. And so that may be very well what is under consideration here, that the thought here is that of something that is dark and dismal, and something that God would ultimately bring to fruition. When we sang this song, we all know that it's a mournful song. We sang it very slowly. It suggests a somber, sober, sullen mood, and certainly all of this, as we read this, the words in this song would leave us with that idea. He goes on, and let me read from the rest of the song as we think about this, as we partake of the Lord's Supper. Night with ebon pinion brooded over the veil. All around was silent, save the night wind's wail. When Christ, the man of sorrows, in tears and sweat and blood, prostrate in the garden, raised his voice to God. Smitten for offenses which were not his own, he for our transgressions had to weep alone. No friend with words to comfort, nor hand to help us there, when the meek and lowly humbly bowed in prayer. Abba, Father, Father, if indeed it may, let this cup of anguish pass from me, I pray. Yet if it must be suffered by me, thine only Son, Abba, Father, Father, let thy will be done. So we all understand, I think, what this passage is saying. We may not understand exactly these words that we mentioned at the very first. But this was God's will for mankind. And the Lord Jesus on this occasion did not want to have to endure the pain and suffering that he did. But the fact is, he did for you and me. And so when we partake of the Lord's Supper, let's keep that in mind.